Scale plus Customer Success Summit. You're currently watching Durable Growth, Evolving and Iterating with your Scaled CS program. And I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. And as I introduce him, I'm going to have him answer our icebreaker question, which is, what would you like to scale with your personal life? So I'm here with Dan Ennis, Senior Manager of Scale Customer Success at Monday.com. And prior to Monday.com, he led customer success at Sterling Administrative and Think HR. So Dan, to our question, what would you like to scale in our personal life?
Great question, Mac. And as a parent of two young children, I'd like to scale out the cleanliness of my house, or the ability to get that cleaned. I think with having a 6 and 8 year old about to be 7 and 9, there's never a day when it just goes cleaning. So if I could somehow figure a way to scale that, I would be golden.
Yeah, I can imagine. Awesome. So before we start the session, just want to remind our audience members that if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. And if we have time at the end of the session, we'll go through and read them. If not, we'll have our speaker, Dan, here post answers to it alongside the session recording, and we'll post it in the resource hub when it goes live. So with that, Dan, I'll let you take over.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Mac. Thank you, everyone, for coming and joining today's session on Durable Growth, Evolving and Iterating Your Scaled CS Program. Today, we're going to really be talking about what durable growth is and how that's something that's important to companies, and really how this core idea of durable growth connects to your Scale CS programs and how you can help pivot your CS team to grow and evolve what you're doing to be a part of what it is that will help your company achieve growth in this new environment. So what we'll cover today on the session is what durable growth is and why that's something your company cares about, because it reflects a shift in the broader macroeconomic climate and the way companies are growing now. So we'll talk about why that matters and how scale fits into that. Then we'll talk a little bit about what the actual building blocks are of durable growth and Scale CS as it fits into that. Then we'll talk what I think is kind of the meat and potatoes of today's session, which is how do you measure and iterate that? I know a lot of people who are on the session today, because we're talking about measuring and iterating on your scaled CS program, you probably already have some version of a program out there, and you want to know, how do we go from MVP to a more productive program? And that's what we'll talk about here. Then we'll focus on how do you keep the customers at the center, because contrary to popular belief, scaled CS is not something that you do separate from customer centricity, but your customers are just as much at the center as always. And then we'll end with a little bit of time for Q&A. But before we dive in, just a little bit of background about myself. I am a Bay Area native from West Coast, Best Coast my whole life. Apologies to anybody else out there on other parts of the country, but as a Bay Area native, I have a lot of Bay Area pride. Love being kind of born and bred around a lot of the kind of Silicon Valley and tech and everything that goes on with that. So it's been fun to see SaaS evolve over the course of my life. I've got over a decade of experience in customer success, both in working with non-traditional tech users as well as some more traditional pure play SaaS companies. I've got over 5 years experience building scaled CS at a couple different orgs, as well as over 5 years experience leading CS at different companies. I've had a really nonlinear career journey, and I really appreciate what that has brought from my perspective, and it's given me a bigger appreciation for other people's perspective. And lastly, I'm really just passionate about coaching and elevating customer success and really helping orgs figure out what this whole scale thing is. And like Mac mentioned, I was, until actually yesterday, the Senior Manager of Scale Customer Success at Monday.com to help build their scale function. And I'll be actually joining a new organization just in a couple of weeks here as their Director of Scaled Customer Success. So that's a brief little bit about me. Who's this Dan guy? Who is he who's talking about this topic? Want to start, of course, just by jumping in and sharing a little bit about why durable growth matters. But before we can talk about why durable growth matters, we have to talk about what came before durable growth, which is really this idea of growth at all costs. And growth at all costs is really the era that SaaS is coming out of. It really came to a screeching halt at the beginning of 2022. We all saw the layoffs that came from this. But this era of SaaS was characterized by companies that didn't particularly care about profitability or unit economics, and they were focused almost entirely on new business acquisition, growing ARR, and that mindset saw growth as the primary goal, and it didn't particularly care about what it took to get there. growth was the only thing that mattered, and the line always had to go up, and it didn't matter what the costs were to do that. And really, the characteristics of that era of SaaS were a fewfold. Number one, it's that the zero interest rate policy funding made money cheap. So companies didn't really have to worry about how much something cost, because they could almost guarantee, if they even had a meaningful idea, they could almost guarantee they were going to get some level of more funding, which made it easy for them to not have to worry about that. And then that led to a lot of more short-term planning of only being focused on the next quarter's goals, because you were trying to continually get the growth to go up quarter over quarter without necessarily a long view to how you're going to maintain growth over the long haul. That also led to things like the metrics that mattered only being growth, not necessarily caring so much about cost to serve or profitability. That wasn't the consideration. The idea was, it doesn't matter if your unit economics add up. If you get to enough scale, if you grow enough new business, eventually you'll be profitable. We don't know how, but you just keep doing it, and eventually you can be profitable. You don't need to worry about that ever as you grow. And what this did was it allowed a lot of businesses to have high levels of new business growth that could cover up deeper problems. They would maybe have a retention challenge, but it didn't necessarily show, because they were expanding and growing customers so quickly and acquiring new business so fast. It still looked like there was a lot of growth. And to solve a lot of problems, humans were just what were thrown at the problems. You could put a person on it, you would hire, you would add headcount. That led to the phrase that has become almost a cliche at this point, which was companies talking about over-hiring, because they would bring people to bear on every challenge that they faced. So these are some of the characteristics of the growth at all costs era that really, like I said, came to a screeching halt at the beginning of 2022 and wasn't sustainable. And that has led to the new focus, which is really this phrase that I'm not unique in having coined this, but I think that's particularly resonates, is this idea of durable growth. And durable growth is sustainable for the long haul. Yes, it's growth. It's not trying to stay flat as an organization, but it's growth that's actually sustainable over the long haul. So this era of SaaS that we're now in is one where the next round of funding isn't guaranteed. Companies can't just count on getting that next series of funding. So they need to figure out how to attain positive cash flow while still growing. And what that's led to is companies are applying resources much more strategically and creatively, and they're actually considering the long-term cost. So what that has looked like is it's created this environment where some of the new characteristics are companies are actually caring about profitability. They're caring about cash burn rate. They're caring about what is the actual cost to serve these different customers. And as they're doing that, you're even having candidates as they're approaching new companies asking questions like, what's their burn rate? How much funding do they have? Those weren't questions that were asked in growth at all costs phase, but they are during durable growth. Companies are setting up growth that's over the long haul, and they're willing to make decisions that, even if they're not going to maximize the revenue in one existing quarter, are setting them up for long-term profitability and growth over the long haul. And that's leading to them approaching challenges in new ways and having to constantly iterate on what they're working on and approaching their challenges with a growth mindset, focusing on what allows customers to stay with them and continue growing. And within that, scaled and digital CS are becoming pillars of companies as they try to grow and provide right-sized service for their customers. So what that all has led to is this idea that durable growth and scale is a marriage that is made in heaven. And it's something that brings together the core principles of CS in a way that allows your company to achieve durable growth. So as you iterate on and evolve your scaled customer success programs, this is one of the key practices that will enable your organization to achieve durable growth and meet customers' ever-changing needs. Because the temptation will be to set it and forget it, create a scaled program that you think worked when you were just trying to do more with less. I know we're all sick of that phrase, but candidly, that is what a lot of companies were given as a mandate. You thought you figured it out, but the problem is the market is still changing. Your customers are still changing. So you need to figure out how to iterate and evolve it. And that's what will bring your scaled CS program to be a core part now of this durable growth. So as we talk about that, I want to take a look here and start by looking at what are the building blocks of durable growth? What goes into your scaled CS strategy that enables you to achieve durable growth that will help your company with the bottom line? We'll look at the strategic building blocks as well as some of the more tactical components that make those up. So from a strategic perspective, really, I see it as you take a look here. There are 4 core building blocks of durable growth, and that's your onboarding, your customer education, your one-to-many engagements and programs, as well as the human interaction. So as you look at this, onboarding, it's that initial success and buy-in that companies want to get their customers have that sets them up for both long-term growth and is sustainable. If you're having to spend as much as the new customer acquisition cost to get a customer onboarded, that's not durable growth. You're caring about doing this in a way that is scalable over the long haul. Then you've got customer education. Customer education is your strategy that's all around the content and the channels that serve customers via self-service and enhance their adoption and help them achieve more with your product. And I think that customer education is going to increasingly become a core pillar that is looked at as companies work on their scaled CS programs, because it's a core part of building out that durable growth that your company cares about, because customers want to self-serve, and that's where customer education can come in. Then you've got your one-to-many engagements and your scaled CS programs. This is the digital and one-to-many lifecycle programs for both scale customers as well as all of the segment of customers. How are you serving these customers proactively via their digital journey map, via their engagements? What are the triggers that you have set up that enable you to not have to put a person on every problem? And then the final building block, of course, is still that human interaction. Scale CS and durable growth aren't about removing the humans from the equation. It's about being able to apply people where they are most strategically needed and where they are most adding value. For example, pointing to a Help Center article isn't the best use of your people. Let's find a better place to put the Help Center article so that your people can be freed up to focus on actual strategic conversations. These right here are the strategic building blocks of durable growth. But tactically, you still want to think through your people, processes, and technology, because these are really high-level ideas and concepts when it comes to your durable growth strategy. So as you think through, for people, for example, you want to ask a series of questions. You want to ask things like, who is owning your digital CS program? That might seem really obvious because you think digital CS, it's in the name. This should be something that goes into our customer success organization. But candidly, a lot of organizations are functionally doing some version of digital CS through their customer marketing teams. So you want to understand, who is it that's going to own this from a people perspective? When should you actually start hiring dedicated roles for your scaled CS program to achieve durable growth? Because you don't want to just immediately throw new headcount at a problem, but you want to understand, when do you hire? When do you bring in new people? On the topic of hiring, who should you hire as you grow? Do you bring in people with a traditional CSM background because you want to have strategic interactions with your customers? Or do you maybe bring in someone with a content or customer marketing background who knows how to generate new content and engage customers in an omni-channel asynchronous manner so that you can achieve this scalable growth? There's not one right answer. It looks different, which is why you would need to answer the skills question. You want to understand, as you're building your scaled CS program, not just for today, but we're talking iteration. As you look to what's next, what you want to do, what are the skills that your digital CS team actually needs? What are required? Because that affects the hiring persona. That affects what you do with the headcount you have. And as you grow, where do you want to invest those human-led engagements? You're not going to be necessarily, like I said, interacting with every single customer in your scaled CS segment and programs using the same tactics, using the same strategies that you would with the high-touch traditional customers, because that's not going to be durable growth. Just to be really candid, you can't put the same amount of human attention on a customer that's paying you $5,000 to $10,000 a year that you can with a customer that's paying you $100,000 a year plus. That's something that you need to be able to understand. Where do you need to invest that human interaction? Because that will help you understand the right persona of people you want to bring involved and how you want to do that. So these are some of the really tactical things to think through from a people perspective. You'll notice that these touch all of the different quadrants. This can affect your onboarding, this can affect your customer education, this affects your asynchronous scale programs, and this affects the actual human interaction. So think through the tactical people. But then that leads to processes. Think through things like, what does digital onboarding look like for your customers? Are you doing a onboarding program that is overly people reliant, Or is there something you can do that involves an onboarding email drip campaign that goes out to new users, that goes out to new buyers when they come on board with your company, that will keep track of if they're achieving certain milestones, and then we'll send a follow-up drip if they haven't with additional resources. Think through what is the actual in-product onboarding you can do. A lot of times scaled CS and digital CS, I always kind of go back to this mantra, a lot of times it's trying to put a Band-Aid on something that might be a core actual challenge with the product. So think through, how can your product be aligned around such a way to make onboarding easier? Or think through one-to-many onboarding webinars. Are you just throwing one person at one customer every time you're trying to do new onboardings? Or are there ways you can cohort your customers that make sense to them by industry, by vertical, by user persona, so that you can, with the same amount of human investment on the front end, be achieving a one-to-many outcome with this digital onboarding? I think this is one of the core ways that you can begin to think through, how do you bring in digital onboarding into your processes? You need to think about that before you go the technology route. We're going to get to technology in a minute, but your technology has to be in service of your strategy, not the other way around. It cannot be a replacement for strategy. So then you want to also think through your customer education. You want to understand, what is it that your customers need? So from a process perspective, customer education is both content and channel. So think through, what is the documentation that your customers need that they can access asynchronously that will help them achieve their goals and have stronger outcomes with your product? And then don't just think about what that documentation is, think about, where does a customer want to access it? If you've got a help center, for example, that lives outside your product that people are never accessing and support is constantly pointing them to, that's not necessarily a sufficient customer education strategy. You want to figure out, how do you match this documentation, this content, to the channel that your customer cares about, where they're going to naturally want to look for it. That applies to things like trainings that a customer can consume on their own. That applies to your community. That can be a core pillar of your customer education as a channel where you deliver that via the community to people. Think through things like your office hours that you can host, where, again, you're bringing together multiple people to help educate them on the product in a way that allows you to have a one-to-many component. Webinars, all of these different components are core pieces of your customer education processes. Then you've got the customer marketing. You've got things like the lifecycle emails, what's going to go out to customers proactively based on where they are in their customer journey and their maturity with your product as they hit certain milestones. Then you've got user behavior that is triggering certain engagements. Map out, what are those email cadences, what are those in-product triggers that if a customer takes or doesn't take certain behaviors, you'll be sending them something. You'll be interacting with them via these digital programs. Think through, what are your upsell and cross-sell cadences going to be, so that you can approach that proactively, because scaled CS can be a great growth lever, which is part of that durable growth. And then again, the voice of the customer is still crucial. So think through sending out, what are the surveys you're going to send out to understand what it is that are making customers successful? What is their feedback? Because you very much care about that, even in a scaled CS motion, which is going to contribute to the durable growth. How are you going to collect success stories that are going to be built into things like case studies, helping other customers understand what success looks like, and so on? Then lastly, from just a human perspective, what are those scaled and low touch customer success processes that you're going to follow? How does a customer get connected with a person when they truly do need a human for some of the challenges that they face? These are all processes and people that we started with before, because you have to start with the people and the processes before you can get to the technology. And really here, I wanted to share more categories of technology to think through as you're scaling and growing out and iterating your digital CS program. So think through, what is the tech you're going to use for a wiki or for the documentation? What is going to be your help center tech stack look like? What are you going to use to send out email marketing to your customers? How are you going to automate that? What is the tool that you need to be able to do that? What are the in-product and in-app engagements going to look like? What tool are you going to use? Can you do that natively from within your product? Do you have the ability to build that out? Or do you need to invest in an additional tool to be able to accomplish that? Think through, how are you going to use a CRM versus what customer success platform you're going to use? How are you going to look at data analytics, which is one of the things I love about a tool. Again, this isn't to promote Matic, I know, but I love about a tool like Matic is it does such a great job at bringing in the data that you've got into a way that's really presentable to your customers and makes it really simple for you to do that and share that information with them. So these are just the categories to think through. And when we think of the iterating on our scaled CS programs, we like to jump straight to the tech because that feels easy, that feels straightforward. But if you're doing that, apart from the building blocks of the strategy components of onboarding, customer education, one-to-many scaled programs, and human interaction, if you haven't built out that strategy yet and defined who the people are that are going to complete the processes, you're going to have a hard time because the technology will not replace your strategy. So you want to think through and iterate on your strategy as you go so that you can understand where to make those appropriate tech investments. So those are just all the building blocks. From there, you want to understand how do you actually measure what's successful within your scaled customer success program so that you can iterate on it, because whatever you don't measure, you won't be able to iterate on because you won't know if it's successful or not. So how do you understand and measure that? So really, looking at the scale program phases, there are 4 phases that I see that scale programs go through. There's defining, analyzing, building, and refining. And really, that defining phase is where I'm going to walk through this really briefly, even though we'll focus on the final one there, refine, because I think that sometimes if you skip any of those other steps, we like to go straight to build, and we haven't done the define or analyze. We wonder why it's not necessarily working the way we would like it to. So you want to define what are the goals and major milestones that you want your scale program to accomplish. Start with what you want to achieve. That might sound really basic, but if you don't have a target, if you shoot for nothing, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. If you shoot at nothing, you'll hit the target every time. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, if you don't have a specific goal for your scaled program, you're just trying to generically do more with less, you won't know if it's effective. So define what the target is, define what the goal is. Is it to reduce the number of human interactions required to help your customers be successful? Is it to increase the number of accounts that each CSM has because candidly, you just can't afford to have the headcount of the prior ratios you were having before. So you need to understand that goal is what will let you build the rest. So from there, after you've defined that, look at what your existing successful customers are already doing today. So this is beginning the analysis. You're going to reverse engineer. You already know who some of your successful customers are. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Reverse engineer, look at what worked for your successful customers. What made them successful? What were the pre-existing steps that they already took? What were their milestones so that you can understand this is what a successful customer journey looks like. Then from there, understand and analyze what are the different customer personas you have with your product. Understand who it is that's using it. Is it highly technical users? Is it a broad base of users? I love that my background both has a really vertical SaaS background as well as very horizontal. So for example, when I was with a company called Think HR, our user personas, it was very vertical in the insurance industry space. So we had a lot of brokers that were both insurance brokers and property and casualty brokers. So there's one very specific type of user persona that was the primary one that used our product. At a company like Monday.com, which has countless user personas, we needed to account for a wide variety of types of users who are using it, but analyze what is it that they need. And for that final step, what steps do those customers need to take to accomplish that desired goal that you set out with at the beginning? What steps do customers have to be able to do? And then you can get to building. From there, you want to build out the scale programs for your various personas. This is when you get to building. This is the part that we want to do. You roll up your sleeves and you actually build out those programs. Define what are the digital motions and the tech you'll need to be able to enable those motions. Do you have an email tool that will allow you to send out the automated emails you need to send? If not, great. Now you know what you need to invest in. Do you have the ability to send something in product? If not, great. You know what you need to invest in, so on and so forth. Understand what are the human touch points going to be. Understand what are the reactive triggers that you need to respond to. And quick pro tip here, you can understand those reactive triggers by looking at those successful customers. If people aren't hitting those milestones, you've already got baked in, these are the things to react to and build triggers on. What are you going to proactively be sending them based on all of this? How are you going to communicate with them proactively? And then this final step, which is where we are today, and what we're going to be focusing on really for the rest of this, is how do you refine? It's tempting, once you've gone through these 4 phases, truly just to feel like I'm done, I've got the burden off my back, I've built our scale program, we're good to go. The problem is tech seems to move at the speed of light. Your customer's situation moves at the speed of light. You can't just set it and forget it. Analyze if your customers are actually engaging with the scale programs. See if you're actually achieving those milestones. From there, iterate to refine your programs and achieve your goals. And really, the rest of this is going to be focused on how do you functionally do that? How do you refine those programs? And it's key to make sure that you're understanding that you're automating and setting up things that work really well. This is one of my favorite Bill Gates quotes. He's talking from a programmer perspective, but I think it is one of the core principles for scaled CS. He talks about the first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. As my friend Rachel Provin likes to say, garbage in, garbage out. If you're just going to go straight to automating things in your scaled program, you might end up actually automating a really ineffective program. So the first thing you need to do before you get to automating, before you get to making things more kind of scaled out, is understand what actually works. Do the hard work of analyzing your CS program and understand what is actually working today before you try to scale that out, before you try to automate it. Because if you find out that you've got a meeting that's just plain not effective, don't try to make that meeting automated, kill the meeting. Be willing to kill your darlings. We had a situation like that on a team I led previously, not in my role at Monday.com, but a role prior to that, where we were trying to understand how to automate a particular touch point that we had with customers, but we realized we had a really low engagement rate on that touch point. And so we realized before automating it, we should either improve it or kill it. So we worked on what went into the touch point in the first place, got it really effective, then we tried to automate it. I can't recommend that enough. So look at what's actually effective before you try to automate. So how do you actually measure things, right? I want to give you something really tactical here. As you look at this and you want to understand what are those durable growth measures and how do you understand what these different components are measured on. So this is a really tactical slide, I think, but it's one that, I'm grateful that I know this deck will be made available after, because I think this can be really helpful for people. So think through your onboarding. You want to measure that on things like, what is the time to first value? How quickly are customers achieving that initial value? And then secondly, what is their health post 90 days, right? Look at how healthy they are. Is this something that's getting them set up really, really well? And fill in that blank with that 90 days. That's just a filler here. Honestly, it can be anything, but really, is this sustainable? Are you setting them up for long-term health and growth? Your one-to-many programs. Look at things like the performance metrics. Think like a customer marketer for a minute. What are the open rates? What are the click-through rates? Are people clicking on the links that you're sending? Are they actually converting? Are they taking the actions you're telling them to take? So let's say you send out an email that's got to get your customers to sign up for a webinar that's going to really help them grow and achieve better goals. A good example with that would be, number one, from a performance perspective, are they opening the email? Are they clicking on the link you're providing? But then a conversion rate metric that you'd look at is, now, out of those that opened and clicked the email, how many are actually signing up for the webinar now? And then you can get into down the line, is the actual webinar having the impact that we wanted it to have, right? You track that all down, because if you don't look at all those measures, you'll iterate on the wrong part. Customer education, you want to look at both the consumption of the content. Are customers going and consuming it? And then how naturally are they coming across it? What is the reduction in tickets to your support team? What's the reduction in outreach to your customer success team? Human interactions, looking at things like customer health, product adoption, CSAT. I know that it's pretty popular to look at a metric like CSAT as a vanity metric, but I think it does tell you about a level of something with the customer interaction. It should not be your only or even your North Star, but it is one of the measures of human interactions. And undergirding all of these are the underlying metrics of things like gross revenue retention, customer success, qualified leads, NPS to some degree, portfolio coverage, cost to serve. Those are the bedrock underlying metrics for your durable growth that apply to all of these. So then when you go through, you want to think through the criteria of what are you measuring specifically to iterate. Those are maybe the high level success criteria of your program. But let's just use one example here of how you can, think through the iterative criteria of something. You want to look at the performance metrics, like I mentioned. How many email opens are happening? What are the click-throughs that are happening? Are people actually downloading the material? Are they visiting the various websites you're directing them to? Are they interacting with your customer success teams? And then all of that feeds into some of your lagging metrics, like your North Star ones, like your net revenue retention, as well as your gross revenue retention, CSQLs, things like that. And then how do your performance metrics relate to your leading metrics? So what is the product adoption? What is the customer sentiment? How many CSQLs are you generating from your digital programs, from your scaled CS team, and so on? And when it comes to what are you measuring that against, there's really two broad philosophies. You can either measure those against the industry standards, as well as measuring against the baseline and understanding how do you improve what it is that you're improving those over time. And then from there, you want to make sure that you can leverage AI to iterate over time. From there, with the AI, there's really the three categories of AI right now, because of course you can't talk about scaled CS without looking at the AI as you have it. And then from there, you can look at the categories of analytical AI. Those are the things that analyze your customer data. You don't need to have a data analyst to be able to understand your different customer segmentation based on the use case, behavior, context, and so on. To hyper-personalize, you can have analytical AI do that. You've got predictive AI that can help you find patterns in the historical and current data to help understand what the potential outcomes are for customers. You can look at these different use cases and mitigate churn and help make sure you're identifying what the appropriate expansion opportunities are. And then just a final example would be the generative AI, which is the one that we tend to think of the most right now, right? How are you going to create personalized content based on identified patterns in the data? Think through how you're going to send out automated QBRs. What are the chatbots you're going to use? Think through the personalized emails that you're going to use, and so on. Then really just to share here on what does that actually look like and how does that actually come into play here? A real life example for us at Monday.com. We had a particular use case with building out resource planning that a lot of customers were reaching out to our customer success team to be able to accomplish. And so we knew that we needed to scale this all out. Quick time check here. Yeah, I saw the note in here, Mac, about it being a bit over. My understandings were until 2:15. Am I misunderstanding that on the calendar invite for this session?
Yeah, keep going.
Oh, sorry. Okay, my apologies. I saw the note about us going over, and I realized I thought we were okay. Perfect. So just to share that brief example. Sorry, I appreciate the time check. Thank you, Tracy. You asked the same question that I had on my brain, so I appreciate that. So as we think about what does that actually look like? So like I said, we had a use case where customers were reaching out to our customer success team and our support team regularly for a particular resource allocation use case within Monday. So we identified this as a use case that we needed to be able to scale out. And so ideally, we've got something in product. However, any of you work with your product team, even the best product team has to work on prioritization because they've got countless requests coming from countless teams. We had a great product team at Monday, so they said, yep, we'd love to build something in product. Candidly, it can't be the top priority to help meet this particular use case. We will work on it, but we want to work on something in the meantime. So from a scale perspective, we began to know that this particular use case was important to our customers to help them be successful. So we immediately implemented something like an office hours that we could have right away. It was low effort on our end to be able to put together an office hours on this use case. Customers came, they attended, they loved it, they learned. In the meantime, we then used our in-app trigger to know, okay, customers were likely to go to this particular place in the actual product to try to, out of the box, build this use case. So we built an in-product trigger there that led them to the office hours. After a while, our product team eventually was able to build this use case directly into the product, but this was the full life cycle of us iterating our programs to help meet a customer need, and we were really able to make sure that we were accomplishing what it was that our customers needed as we evolved our program. We didn't just set it and forget it and say, nope, we've got our office hours topic set, doesn't matter. We needed to iterate and match the content that our customers needed over time. So that's just one example, because we knew that that particular metric related very strongly to retention with our customers. So that's measuring and iterating. And then really this final section here, as you talk about measuring and iterating, is how do you keep your customers at the center? Because we're all in customer success for a reason. And that's because we really truly believe that customers being successful is the core to companies growing and staying relevant over time. So how do you do that? Really, your customers are the core of your durable growth. This isn't something that is off to the side. Customers aren't tangential just because it's a scaled program and you're doing less human interactions. So think through, these are some of the ways that your customers being kept at the center actually contribute to durable growth. Think through things like your cost to serve doesn't outweigh the revenue you bring in from customers. So your customers are successful with your product. They're achieving outcomes that make them want to stay with your company without you having to just constantly throw more people at the problem. Because then you've got a cost to serve that's relevant. Your customers are successful. They're staying there. You're achieving durable growth. A superior customer experience, a second pillar here, superior customer experience generates really strong second order revenue. So second order revenue is that thing that we might find hard to track, but is crucial to companies growing. Things like a customer just happening to tell another customer how much they loved your product. Think through a customer who the champion leaves one company and goes to another company, brings your product with them because they loved it so much. Or think through the way that your customers act as advocates on your customer advisory boards, or the way they help contribute to your product. These are all examples of your customers being kept at the center achieves durable growth by contributing to revenue over time. Your customers will grow with your product. If customers stay with your product for the long haul, not just for the next quarter, not just for 1 year, and they stay with your company long enough to well achieve their payback period, when you think of the customer acquisition cost, they stay with it long enough. They don't just enable consistent revenue, the customers will actually mature with your product. And that creates this really beautiful story for your company, where your company enables customers to actually mature and grow over time, which is part of the durable growth. Then lastly, your customers have a really strong partnership in the actual development of your product, which leads to durable growth. This is whether it's through voice of customer programs that help influence the roadmap that you have as you input with customer feedback and understand what they want, whether it's customers are helping offset the cost of dev, or even just customer advocacy teams that lead to improvements in the product that contribute to revenue. All of these are ways that you keep the customer at the center through your scaled CS programs, and the second order effects of all of these all contribute directly to the durable growth that your company very much cares about in this new environment. And so really, how do you do that? You want to think through asking questions. What is the customer's actual experience in these different categories? Just a series of questions here. I am actually usually I don't just read off the slide, but I'm gonna just read these because I think it's helpful for us to see. With onboarding, do your customers have what they need to get up and running? How do customers define successful onboarding? Not just you, not just they've completed the program, we're good to go. No, how does a customer feel onboarded? How will their new users be onboarded post-launch into your product? Through customer education, are customers able to self-serve to grow in their product expertise? Even the customers with the best CSMs, they don't want to have to pick up the phone to call someone. They would rather be able to self-serve. Are your resources in a place that makes sense for the customer? Are they having to get that info from support all the time? Or also they have to find it in the product where they want? What are your customers still going to support for? That's a great way to find ways to iterate on your customer education. Are they going to support for consistent, regular things that proactive customer education can solve? One-to-many programs. Think through questions like, are we sending mixed messages to the wrong user persona? Are we confusing our customers by overlapping our messaging with marketing? Are they getting 3 emails in a week from us, 2 from the marketing team, 1 from CS, that's going to create a confusing journey for them? Does our content actually make sense for customers? Hint in this category, sign up for all your content. If you're not receiving it like a customer would, it's easy to just get in the bubble of your own ecosystem and assume everything makes sense and forget what it actually feels like to the customer. than for human interactions? Does the customer actually prefer a meeting for particular interactions? In SaaS, we are notorious for creating meetings that are very us-centric and not customer-centric. So think through that. Second, think through, do customers have a way to strategize with someone when they need to? And then, are we deploying the people where our customers actually need it? So these are all series of questions that you can ask about the customer's experience. And then think through, how do you actually get their perspective? I would say on that front, let's just use scale programs as one example, because there's countless ways. Looking at things like their engagement metrics, if they're not engaging with your content, you know areas that you want to improve. Looking at the qualitative feedback in CSAT surveys and NPS, again, not using NPS as a North Star, but understanding what does it actually tell you about their perspective on something. Getting the sentiment in your community. You've heard me talk about community a few times here. If you don't have a community, that's a great thing to get set up. What is it that they're talking about? And then human conversations. I know we don't like talking about that on the scale side, but there are a few replacements sometimes for really good human conversations, whether that's in an office hours environment, getting customers' feedback on the programs you're having, selecting strategic customers to be able to understand what is it that their perspective is on the program. Then lastly, following up with customers who give a negative CSAT. Understand, have a meeting with them, understand what it is, go more in depth with them. These are all ways just to get their feedback, because the point here is you want to make sure you don't lose the customer's voice in your scaled programs. And these are all just ways you can go about accomplishing that and understanding how do you get their perspective. So that's really at a high level here. Wanted to focus on that. That's really what I've got for today on how you build and iterate your scaled CS program to achieve durable growth. And so with that, we've got about 5 minutes for Q&A. So Mac, I will turn it over to you. I know you're going to ask some of the questions that are here.
Yeah, definitely. And sorry about the confusion about the timing before. First question that we have is, have you had experience migrating customers off of a named CSM into a scaled/digital strategy? And if so, like, how do you work with realigning your expectations?
Absolutely. So I would say yes, we absolutely have, like any program. I would say there's a couple different components to it that you want to think through. Number one, it starts with setting the right expectations internally, and that might sound like that goes without saying, but you want to make sure that support, that sales, that all relevant customer-facing teams are aligned to your new strategy and the expectations. You don't want to be sending mixed messages from different channels. That's number one. Number two, one of the things that we've done in the past that I've had a lot of experience on is use data to define and understand how are you going to shape the message and who do you need to target. For example, when we moved to a more scaled CS approach with one of the orgs I was a part of, we had a large cohort of customers that we were moving to that model. And we realized when we looked at the data that 80% or so of the customers that were impacted by that move were already only using about as many human meetings as they would still be entitled to in our scaled programs. So we actually got to focus our messaging on the 20%, on those that would be experiencing a change. Because for those 80%, it functionally was a non-event other than the fact that they were getting more out of the digital programs. So I think that letting data there will understand how you focus that. And then with that 20%, understand what is the challenge that they're going to face so that you can craft your messaging accordingly. Whether that's focusing on the actual benefits that they will be getting in the new program, whether that's focusing on how you're going to make sure that you are not leaving them in alert, you're actually providing them with something that enables them to be able to be more self-sufficient, and focusing on the what's in it for them, keeping them at the center. And then lastly, when it comes to realigning those expectations, if you believe in the model, if you truly believe this is going to benefit them, I can't say this last part enough, stick to your guns, because you will get a noisy customer or two. And sure, if there's a big churn risk somewhere in there, think through how you make an exception. But for most customers, in my experience, despite maybe some noise at the beginning, because we really believe that this model was better, after the initial noise, they achieved what they wanted and we're still getting successful outcomes with the product and weren't feeling left in alerts because we really were meeting them where they at with what they needed. And then suddenly they became an advocate. So hopefully that helps answer your question a little bit there, Tom.
Yeah, definitely. And then another question that we have is, how do you get alignment around the goals of the scale program from leadership?
Love that. And I think that we could have a whole separate session on this,
Yeah.
but it ties to making your scaled program goals the same as your company's goals, the senior leadership's goals, tying into what's in it for them. Do not let your scale program be done in a vacuum. Do not let it be tied to fluff vanity metrics. That might sound, I mean, I'm being really blunt there, but you want to make sure that your program aligns to the goals your company is after. How does your scaled program reduce cost to serve so that your company is achieving greater profitability? Your executive leadership, I guarantee you, cares about that. How does your scaled program lead to stronger customer experience that leads to higher retention rates? Your company very much cares about that. Your executive leadership cares about that. How are you going to reduce the new business acquisition cost by reducing cost of upsell by doing a digital program that leads customers in a proactive journey so that you're not having to spend as much to get them to upsell, cross-sell, expand with your company? These are all things your company cares very much about. And so I think making sure you know how to tie your metrics to what your senior leadership cares about, and then you've got buy-in, then you've got commitment.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. And with that, we're actually at time. So any questions that we weren't able to get to, we'll pass along to Dan, and he can share his answers along with the recording of this session in our resource hub, which we notify you guys out when it's available. So just want to say thank you, Dan, for coming out here and speaking with us. And thank you, everyone else who attended.
Thank you so much, Mac. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. It was a pleasure to chat with you all today.